Well, welcome back to Open to Truth, a podcast all about exploring big ideas and discovering truth together. My name's Clint.
Hey, I'm Tony. Welcome back.
Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, we have a weekly blog. If you enjoy reading about ideas as well as listening, they're about 3 to 5 minutes. Fun little nugget of thoughts to start your day.
It's good stuff. This is stuff Clint's writing. I don't write these blogs. So Clint's writing them, and they're well written, and they'll get you thinking. And they're a good precursor or digestible short version of some of the topics we talk about in the podcast.
Totally. And if you're like me, I don't really like to get notifications from YouTube to my email because I subscribe to a bunch of channels and it would be overwhelming.
They have a new video.
I don't want to click the bell ever.
Yeah.
So if you want to click our bell, by all means,
we'll take it.
But the blog is a good way to. The blog is always about that week's episode.
Right. It's on topic.
So at the bottom of the blog, there's a button to send you to the YouTube if you want to watch the episode or listen on Spotify.
So
or iTunes.
how do they sign up for the blog?
Yeah, so you can go to opentotruth.com/subscribe.
There you go.
And it's free, just one email a week of the blog.
Yep.
And also, if you're watching on YouTube, there's a link down below.
Perfect.
In the, what is that?
Description.
Yeah,
description.
Yep.
Perfect.
That's all for housekeeping.
All right, yeah. So today we are going to be talking about Stoicism.
Oh.
It's which you may or may not have heard of. It's undergoing something of a resurgence or a renaissance.
I see it all over Instagram.
Do you really?
Everyone's all about now.
Now you subbed to just philosophy.
I did.
Instagram, channels.
Hashtag philosophy.
Yeah, that's why you're seeing it.
That's spreading like wildfire.
It's spreading like wildfire, but it's not new, right? So the ideas seem to be gaining popularity, but they're not new ideas. They're thousands of years old, some of these ideas.
Who are some of the major players of
back in the day?
Yeah.
Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. I read his meditations recently. Well, I say read. It was an audiobook.
Yeah.
Which I know you don't include. Oh, really? You're giving me a pass on that? You've been a stickler for that in the past. It's not reading.
I didn't want to
start
the fight here, but
okay.
That's strictly not reading.
Yeah. So I want to just today explore a little bit of what Stoicism is and hopefully put it in plain English for people. Maybe what it isn't or some
I bet you've seen.
misconceptions.
I mean, I don't think it's just me and like what I've self-selected into on Instagram. I think there is a trend of like, I don't know if you want to call it like new age spirituality of like that whole movement, but I feel like they're kind of reaching down into the path and like, here's some stoicism. Well, there's something to that.
Yeah, and I think whether or not you've known to call it stoicism, Stoic principles have probably come across your path. In fact, you may have unknowingly used Stoic strategies as a coping mechanism throughout life. Like, for example, I don't know, if you're at all involved in Christendom, you might be familiar with the Serenity Prayer. What is it? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Oh.
That's a little
I didn't know
prayer.
that was that written by an ancient Greek Stoic philosopher?
I don't know if it was, but it's certainly Stoic in its principles. So, I guess just to start defining what we're even talking about a little bit, I'd like to hear, actually, you go first. I want to hear your take on what Stoicism is. Sure. In a short, like the elevator pitch.
So just briefly, one, a plague facing philosophers is the idea that like just people lump a lot of things into philosophy and that's fine. But just because I have studied philosophy does not mean that I am an expert on all things having to do with philosophy.
Yeah.
That spans thousands of years and lots of different figures.
Broad.
So my specialty is not ancient Greek philosophy. But as far as what I understand is there's a big debate back then between the Stoics and the Epicureans. And it was in the realm of ethics and the good life. How do I achieve happiness? So the Stoics were pretty adamant that happiness solely has to do with what's going on the inside. Call it your mental life, your inner world, your inner peace. Whereas the Epicureans would say, no, to have the good life, you have to have a certain amount of external goods. And that varied depending on which Epicurean you asked. It could be basics, shelter, food, and then all the way up the hierarchy of needs, so to speak, and what constitutes the flourishing life. And in that if we just boil it down to those basic two competing ideas, I think we see that happening today. Like that conversation hasn't been settled.
Yeah, that's still an ongoing debate.
And then do you want me to go any further into that, like reasons for why?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think both have intuitive pull. The Stoic, who says that ultimately happiness depends internally, I think we've made similar noises throughout the relaunch of this podcast, where if you can't find contentment now, that nothing in the future will necessarily bring it to you. Like that's external to you. There's not some new thingy that you buy or some new experience isn't going to bring you lasting contentment. It's inner work that's ultimately gonna bring you there. I find that really intuitive.
Yep.
On the other hand, boy, when I imagine a life totally devoid of external goods, I'm imagining the slums across the world in India or something, and the poverty I saw firsthand in Haiti when I went there during high school. They are lacking so many external goods that I enjoy. I'm not saying that I'm necessarily happier than they are. Well, not yet, but
okay. Okay.
But man, there is a certain level of poverty and lack that just seems so grinding on the human experience. Like I don't have access to clean water. I have to travel 20 miles, or I have to pay an exorbitant amount of my yearly income just to be able to drink water every day. And the list could go on of the ways that it seems like your life can genuinely go worse if you don't have things.
Tough to call that the good life.
I know, right? Yes.
Yeah.
I find both ideas intuitive. So that, and a lot of people have, and that's why it's a perennial
ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the way you use the word happiness there. And I'm curious what exactly you mean by that, because my understanding of Stoicism, and maybe this isn't, maybe I'm not a true Stoic, or maybe this isn't true Stoicism or something, but when I think about Stoicism, first of all, it's a philosophy of life. So these are more than just sort of abstract ideas. This is a way to be in the world, or a way to navigate through life's challenges that seeks to put emphasis on the cultivation of virtue, the cultivation of character formation in oneself, and pays close attention to what is and what is not within our control. And when I think about Stoicism, one of the first examples I think of is carrying yourself in such a way that you don't suffer unnecessarily, or you don't inflict suffering on yourself unnecessarily over things that you can't control. It reminds me of this parable that I think the Buddha told, or someone related to the Buddha told, about a man who gets shot with an arrow, which is suffering enough, but then to be fixated on the fact that he has been shot with an arrow, and to be wishing that he weren't shot with an arrow, and to be all caught up in this story about poor little me, I've been shot with this arrow. That whole narrative mental path that he goes down actually causes more suffering than is necessary in that situation.
It's a metaphorical second arrow.
It's a metaphorical second arrow, yeah. So if he had been able to, the sooner he can accept the fact that he has been shot with an arrow and cease resisting that fact, it has happened. You have been shot. The sooner you can come to terms with that, the sooner you cut off at the pass any of this additional psychological suffering that you... Now, that's not to say you won't suffer physically. An arrow would hurt to get shot with.
Yeah.
But we tend to, in our lives, add all kinds of secondary arrows to the setbacks that befall us. And so I think there's something to Stoicism about just as quickly as you can accepting when something is and is not within your control.
So maybe what I'm wondering with my little comment earlier about like New Age stuff, how similar is this to just, and forgive me my lack of nuance, but just Eastern traditions? But like you mentioned Buddhism.
Yeah.
Is this the same idea just repackaged from a different geography?
I think there's overlap.
I'm imagining the Shaolin monk that you thwack over the head with a bamboo beam, and he's like chill about it.
Yeah.
from some kung fu movie. Just boom. And he didn't care because he's so trained. His inner life is so peaceful. You threw a rock into his pond and no ripple.
He just
occurred.
accepts it.
Yeah.
I think there's overlap, and I think that overlap has to do with mindfulness. So being aware of one's own state, like when you are angry, there's a difference between being angry and also being aware that you are angry. So being caught up in anger and dragged away by
reacting to the stimuli.
Yeah, being
as a beast.
Yeah, or being lost in some story that you tell yourselves. I can't believe they said that, and then they went and they're probably saying this to other people, and you work yourself up into this state of anger
and anxiety, even sometimes.
And anxiety. Yeah. Whereas mindfulness training would allow you to recognize anger has been triggered in me, anger is present, and instead of allowing your awareness to follow this narrative you want to tell yourself, if you instead turn that awareness on the anger itself, the physical sensation of the burning in my chest, or where do you feel rage?
Yeah, I'd put
it's
it
in
there.
the chest, like
sometimes it goes out to my
like
fingertips,
a heat, like
and it needs to be released. Yeah,
yeah. So there's some kind of it sounds woo-woo, but some kind of an energy that you're feeling in your body. It's physiological. I feel this anger response. If you turn your attention on that sensation itself and get really curious about it, to make that the object of your awareness, it will dissipate. Within minutes, probably, it will dissipate. Whereas if you don't do that and you're not mindful, as long as you continue to imagine and spiral out in stories, that anger will intensify. You can, even right now as you sit here, you can manufacture these feelings in yourself. If I tell you to think about your kids laughing, smiling, just having the time of their life, there is some degree of pleasure that starts to come over you in terms of emotions, warm feelings towards those kids.
Yeah, it's happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if I tell you to think about somebody who really hurt you or somebody who slandered you behind your back and just revisit that memory, it changes. It all suddenly starts to get tight and anxious and upset.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you have the ability to choose where you place your attention. So
both of those were pretty minimal experiences due to it not really happening.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Right. So I think you're right that there is overlap between these Eastern traditions that focus a lot on mindfulness and awareness, and meditation would be a good training ground for a Stoic. I think they go hand in hand pretty nicely. But I do think that they're different. I have a couple of Stoic thought exercises that I thought might be helpful to tease out the way a Stoic would approach different situations.
So this is different from going to the thought experiment lab.
That's right.
We're going to go to a mental gymnasium.
Yeah, we're going to do a mental workout here.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to hit the gym. Okay, so Stoics have, and you can find these online. You could Google Stoic thought exercises or Stoic practices. These are little ways of, let's say, reframing your situation that can change how you feel about it. So one of them, for example, that's pretty famous, I hope I'm saying this right, is memento mori. Is that right? Remember death.
Yes.
Remember death, which sounds pretty morbid.
Sounds cool.
Sounds cool when you say it in Latin.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I know of Stoics who will keep a little skull or some icon in their office or nearby just to remind them, you are mortal, you are going to die. Everything and everyone you love will be taken from you at some point. Your body will fail you. You will become weak. You will lose all of your independence, and ultimately you will have to face the Grim Reaper and step through that threshold of death. And that sounds really dark. Most people's instinct when you lay that all out is ugh, why are you talking about that? I don't want to think about death.
Right.
We try to avoid thinking about it at all costs.
Now, sorry if I'm jumping the gun here, but as the moment you brought it up, I thought of how often I see the icon of the crucifix.
Oh, that's interesting.
I thought of how preposterous it would be to hang a skull from my dashboard thing, the mirror. But then I'm well, a lot of people hang crucifixes.
Wear around your neck.
And that is a symbol of death in a way.
It is, yeah.
Now, I don't know if they're using it in that way.
Yeah, I think that
you're talking about.
Yeah.
Remember the existential plight that you're in.
Right. I think there'd be some who use the crucifix to remember Christ's sacrifice, or there'd be some who use it to remember their own call to carry a cross and self-sacrifice.
The cruciform life.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, remembering death is something we tend to avoid. The average, like if you bring this up at a party, most people are going to be like,
we've done it at work before.
you're bringing
and people
everybody
are like,
down.
What are you guys talking about? I'm like, I think about death every single day.
Every day.
Not because I've necessarily even mastered Stoicism by any means, and I kind of have forgotten that Latin phrase, but genuinely, like when I drive around the town, I'm worried about dying. I think about, like, this could be the end.
Yep.
My little Kia Rio, and just like it veers out, like it hits a little patch of ice, and that's it.
Yeah.
I think about it constantly.
It really could happen.
Yeah.
I know. I think about this too when I'm driving. Like, the fact that if you ever get into a car accident, like maybe not all the time, most of the time, if it's an accident, it's unexpected. It will take you by surprise.
Yeah.
So you're driving along and you think everything's fine. But is it? Because something could take you by surprise.
Now, maybe I'm living with too much just like base rate
Baseline.
anxiety, but I don't always think everything's fine.
It's possible.
That might have to do with just I think it has to do with the size of my car.
Yeah.
It's this little,
It's a small car for a big boy.
I could see why people are just a little more relaxed in their big truck.
Yeah. A little bit safer.
Yeah, it sure
Your
is.
thing would crumple like aluminum foil, mate. Yeah.
In any case, yeah.
So the idea of remembering death is not to produce
And not just my own death, too,
Right.
importantly.
The deaths
just
of others.
the phenomenon of it. Or
Yes.
can we get metaphorical? The death of a dream?
Sure.
Okay.
All things come to an end for you. Everything is flux, right? Everything is transient. Everything that has ever come into your life will at some stage go out of your life. And so, yeah, it's not supposed to produce like a baseline level of existential anxiety. Instead,
Thankfulness.
Yes, it is supposed to cultivate gratitude. Another way of saying this is like the thought exercise of it, the last time exercise. The idea that
Yeah.
tonight could be the last time you have dinner with your family. So, in light of that, if you knew it was the last time, would you live it differently? And how would you live it differently? If you knew that tonight when you kiss your wife, that's the last time you're going to kiss her.
But how do you remember to do that? There's so many, like you just highlighted 2 moments in an evening, but that's too abstract for how my life actually goes. It's happening moment by moment. In between there, I went to the bathroom. It's the last time I'm gonna pee. Yeah. And there's a certain sensation of that's fun.
Yeah.
And like, do I have to like just be cherishing that? Am I constantly cherishing every moment?
Well, isn't that the goal? Wouldn't that be the good life? If you did cherish every moment?
I don't know. Maybe. I could see why initially, but something about it strikes me as
Like just impractical? Or
well, there's some things are more valuable than others.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to take
Maximally cherish every single moment.
that.
I should like the family dinner more than going to the bathroom. But that might be the last time I go to the bathroom.
Well, let's say maximally cherish every moment, but each moment might have a different ceiling for how cherishable it is.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay, got it.
Like the pleasure you can take in dinner with a family might far exceed the pleasure you can take from urination.
Yeah.
But there's some pleasure you can take from urination. So cherish it as much, cultivate delight in your life.
That's good.
And take delight, make a habit of it by recognizing that it may not be with you forever. And this can even transform things that you might see as a chore in some way. And mindfulness will do this anyway, like washing dishes. I don't want to wash these dishes. They're all in the sink. It's going to be a chore. That's an attitude, an internal stance that I can take towards this chore I'm about to undertake. Or
it's not inherently bad.
It's not inherently bad. You can see this in kids who are learning chores. When they do it for the first time, I remember the first time I ever washed dishes. My dad taught me how. It was kind of fun because I was like role-playing an adult. This is what adults do. And did I get my hands all wet and it's nice warm water and the soap or whatever. And it's like the closer attention you pay to these things, you actually can take delight in washing dishes. It's your coming to the situation with a resistance, an internal struggle that makes it a struggle. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Okay, so let's just vocalize the Epicurean crowd over here. That's like, okay, but some things you just listed a bunch of great stuff. Having dinner with your family, even washing dishes, like that's not so bad. But man, like my car broke down and it got stuck on the side of the road and I need to push it out.
Yep.
That's not fun.
No.
Or getting a root canal.
No.
This could be the last time. I'm hoping it's the
I
last
hope it's the last time.
you know?
Yeah.
Like some things seem like I don't want to repeat that.
Yep.
And so what does it really mean to be cherishing all moments? And
Well, again, I think maybe there's the ceiling thing. Maybe there is only so much you can cherish,
Okay.
pulling a car out of a ditch. But there's other helpful reframing exercises as well that might help in those sorts of situations. So, for example, one of them would be taking this is called negative visualization, taking a moment to think about how much worse things could be. So, you've got a flat tire and you're in a ditch and you've got to call a truck or get it towed or something.
yeah.
Can you imagine a way that situation could be worse than it is? Maybe
Absolutely.
it's a blizzard.
Yeah.
Maybe it's freezing cold and you don't have the proper attire for that. Maybe instead of just a flat tire, your car caught on fire. That would be worse, you know?
Well, and what's that supposed to be doing, really?
So,
I mean, of course.
yeah, all that's supposed to do is reframe.
Solar flare could incinerate us. Just
Yeah. You can basically always imagine a way in which a situation could be made worse or could have been worse than it is. And what that does is supposed to reframe, as you contrast the situation with how much worse it could have been, instead of being as bent out of shape that this thing has happened to you, it allows even just the door of gratitude to creak open in your heart that, well, I'm glad that it's not that bad. Another useful thing for a situation like that is this idea that it's going to make a great story one day. And
Sure.
and that can reframe things. There's AJR have a great song called 100 Bad Days. I love AJR. If you don't know who they are,
I don't know, is that an abbreviation? Or is it
it's
is that
their
what they're
names.
called?
I forget their names.
Oh, okay.
But yes, it is. Three brothers. Anyway, pop band. And they have a song called 100 Bad Days. Chorus says something like 100 bad days means 100 good stories, and 100 good stories makes me interesting at parties. And that's a really stoic way to look at that. That as you're having a bad day, in that moment, it's going to be unpleasant. There might be pain involved. It could be worse than it is. And also, you've probably said this. I know I've said this in situations. Well, this is going to make a good story one day. Like when Melissa and I first bought this house, we were moving in the first night here, and we had just moved everything in. We were going to return the U-Haul, and we thought we'll just get a load of laundry going while we do that. And we came back, and we could hear dripping. And we were like, we had just gone out and we got ice cream and wine to celebrate. First home, we just moved in. We get home from returning the U-Haul and we're hearing water dripping. And I go downstairs and water is just, in this room actually, where we sit now, water is just pouring through the ceiling, onto the floor, onto the carpet. It's like, what have I done? So I go upstairs to the laundry and we see that the sink, which the washer drains into, we didn't realize it drained into the sink. There was like a plastic bag in the sink that was blocking the plug. So that sink had overflowed, the laundry had flooded, and then it had all gone down through the floor into this room.
Oh, my word.
And I can't remember if Melissa started crying when we came down here, and she was very upset. I laughed out loud when I saw it happening, which at the time, that struck me as an interesting reaction. And I do remember this fleeting moment of, okay, I see Melissa's upset. I could similarly get uptight, or I can recognize this is hysterical. Of course. First night in a house.
Yeah,
and we flood it right away. This is going to be a great story. This is absurd. I can't believe this has happened to us. And I burst out laughing. Now, I do think some personalities maybe are predisposed towards a stoic approach to life. Certainly, it probably has to do with degree of neuroticism or negative, how strongly people feel negative emotion, on that big five personality trait. So I think some people thrive on anxiety, that when there is nothing to be anxious about, they will look for something to be anxious about, or they'll find some drama.
As a matter of their predisposition, or is that trainable away from that?
I don't know. I don't know about that.
That's tough.
I'm not sure. But I think there's some personalities, like I said before, who probably use stoic approaches, whether or not they know to call it that. And my dad was always this way. It's like he's a very go with the flow kind of a guy. So if plans change unexpectedly, okay, let's get on board with the new thing that's happening as quickly as we can. instead of continuing to wish it was other than it is, accepting the way it is.
I do hear
you're having trouble.
Well, I mean, I agree with that. That sounds like sound advice, but I am hearing this other side. Here's what I want to preserve.
Yeah.
That something, and I mentioned it earlier, some things are genuinely better than other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I worry that the ethic of the Stoic is, and maybe there's different, again, you said maybe I'm not a true Stoic.
Yeah.
Maybe we're using those words in different ways. I think I'm meaning like the ethical, the philosophy that my life can only go better or worse based on what's going on the inside.
Yeah, I guess I would just...
There's a nugget of that I appreciate, but then the other side of me says, like, there are external goods that really do make for a good life, and you should want that other thing and not be satisfied with what you have now. Or did you not? You lost me at the end. Did you not like that part?
Well, I'm wondering how that relates to your claim earlier that if you can't find contentment in the present, there's no guarantee you will find it.
Here's an example. Like, I'm still paying off a bit of student debt, student loan debt. I think my life would be better if I didn't have to be doing that. I would have more disposable income to do whatever. And that can be used from better or worse ways. You don't have to go into all that. I could squander it on myself or give it away, and there's value that comes from that. But wouldn't it be better than just like paying? It just feels like it's doing nothing. I got a degree from it. I understand the logic of what's happening. But I would like to not be paying that off anymore to be able to do other things with it.
Yeah.
My life isn't equally good now as it will be when that's paid off.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Okay.
I think these things have to be held in tension somehow, because I can also imagine that your desire to be in the place where your student debt is paid off could cause you so much frustration that your quality of life in the present is really diminished. So there's got to be some degree of like learning to be content and moving towards improving things. Like, I don't think the Stoic or the virtuous man is the one who, when he gets hit over the head with a log, just is tranquil and sits there. Or
I wonder what'll happen next.
Yeah. Or say, take it to the extreme. His child is being hit over the head with a log. Well, this is happening. And there's nothing, I just accept it. Like, no. The virtuous man acts in that situation, I would think. So I don't think the goal of Stoicism is just detach emotionally from everything.
I want to get to that part. So that I see that piece being a feature of the Eastern traditions of
the detachment.
The main problem of humanity is the suffering that we impose on ourselves. If you could only remove yourself or detach yourself from desire and expectations, then a lot of suffering would go away. Again, the physical suffering, sure. Can't get around that, your biology. But even there, I've heard some cases. Wim Hof, that bloke?
Yeah, what?
Sits in the cold water.
If we could get him on the podcast, dude. He's a hoot to listen to as well.
I would love to do the Wim Hof breathing method with him. I've done it in the quiet of my own home, but I want him to do it for me.
Yeah.
I used it in a sermon the other week.
Did you?
Because he said, it tickled me to death. When he talks about breathing, he says, pull it in and let it go. And I did that. I did a breathing exercise.
That's great.
I just like that idea of pulling. But that bloke, for those who don't know, I mean, he sits in this cold water for like a half hour or whatever.
Very stoic. Takes ice baths and climbs mountains in shorts and No, I think you're totally right that I think one of the main Buddhist principles is that desire is the root of all suffering. Attachment is the root of all suffering.
And I don't like that. I want to resist that notion.
That it's the root of all suffering. It seems like there's some
I definitely don't like that.
Yeah.
But not only, I think it's the source of great good. I would flip it. Not only is it not the cause or source of all suffering, it's the source of much good. You can. I'd rather be in the business of trying to figure out misaligned attachments rather than ridding myself of all of them.
I like that a lot. Well, one of the issues, the bones I pick.
That's a good quote.
With the Buddhists. That is good. Tweet that.
Yeah.
One of the bones I pick with the Buddhists, and maybe this is where Zen starts to tiptoe in with all their koans and great. But it seems to me paradoxical. If the Buddhist tells me, rid yourself of all desire, suddenly I'm filled with a desire to rid myself of desire.
I appreciate.
And that's
you pulling on
inescapable.
this.
It seems like desire is inescapable because even wanting to be rid of it is itself a desire. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where Zen comes in, and they sort of throw up their hands and say eventually it will click for you that you're stuck with desire. And that's what the koans are supposed to sort of unravel for you.
What's a koan?
You know, the little
the
word,
sound of one hand clapping.
kind of those little word puzzles that
Okay.
are supposed to sort of turn the mind upon itself, and you recognize, oh, it's unsolvable in some way. Yeah, just like your desire problem, mate. You know? I think that's, if any Zen masters are out there listening,
Yeah.
and you could correct me on that, go for it. But
But I don't have too big of a problem just accepting that, okay, all of them except that one meta desire.
okay.
Get rid of you can't get rid of the meta desire, but all these other,
But see, I think, yeah, having that meta desire would still produce suffering in me and frustration. I felt
I'm
that
saying
as I sit there and
yeah.
meditate. I'm like, I just want to be rid of desire. Dang it, I'm still suffering because I want to be rid of desire, you know? So I don't know if there's any Buddhists. If I'm getting that wrong and there's some Buddhists out there that can help me.
So what's
means.
like some closing thoughts then? What do we do with Stoicism? Is
Well-
it actually life guiding? Is it or maybe just because our audience, a lot of people are, like of the Christian persuasion and
Yeah.
are trying to figure that out. How does that relate to
Like, is it compatible with Christianity?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Or like the Jesus ethic, whatever that amounts to. Are those compatible? Yeah.
I don't see anything in Stoicism that would conflict with a Christian ethic or a Christian worldview. I mean, it's not making metaphysical
I guess
claims.
I guess my issue with the Eastern tradition, the detachment from desire, I see Jesus and other figures calling me to a life of love and self-sacrifice. Even that seems like I am trying to cultivate some like emotional health and responding emotionally correctly to different situations.
Yes.
So insofar as Stoicism, the principles are being lived out in the Eastern tradition, then I'm not as much of a fan.
Yeah. I guess I don't see them as being like, I don't think the healthy Stoic is devoid of emotion. I think they are correctly related to their emotions. They will feel anger at times, but not more than is necessary.
Gotcha.
You know, they will, the minimal necessary amount.
And they don't allow the second arrow.
That's right.
Yeah.
The minimal amount of perturbation when confronted with a setback is the goal of Stoicism, I think.
I wish I was better at quoting scripture, but like there are stoical things
Sure.
that Jesus says.
Yeah.
The do not be anxious or do not worry. And then what's the little part after that? Like it won't add a single hour to your life or something like that.
Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life?
Great.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think
That's right.
I think that's correct. Yeah. Worrying accomplishes not much.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's
That's a Stoic principle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's overlap there. Mm-hmm. So I think
Is there
right.
something the Stoic would be saying for me to do that's incongruent?
I have a hard time
Okay.
thinking of one. Maybe the difference, here's maybe the rub, is depending on, as a Christian, what your views are about what happens after you die, maybe remembering death, maybe it reframes some of that for you. Well, what I do here...
You did mention the Grim Reaper at one point. Like he'd be confronted by him. I don't know.
Well, the Stoic...
He's in my metaphysical furniture.
The Stoic idea is that you don't want to get dragged into the grave kicking and screaming, filled with regret. You want to prepare for death so that when that day comes, you can stare the Grim Reaper in the eye and say, yeah, I lived well. I lived fully. I paid attention to my life. It didn't rush by me. I was there for it. I showed up for it.
Yeah.
And now I'm ready to die. Now, Christians who have hope of an afterlife might, that's not the end. It's not the case that YOLO.
Yeah.
So
Are you saying the Stoic philosophy is necessarily tied to a lack of afterlife?
No, maybe not necessarily, but there's something about like
The finality of it?
the finality. So if you knew you were never going to kiss your wife again because I'm going to die and it's permanent,
Yeah,
that's
that's
different than, well, I'll see her on the other side and we'll catch up for eternity. Actually, this is just a blip. Most of my time with her will be spent after the grave.
No, that's really insightful. That's a
So,
big difference.
yeah.
I mean, that you see that all the time in Christian circles.
Right.
of, well, whenever there's been a regret, sometimes a punt is given to like, well, we'll get to do it in eternity.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. So that's the biggest point of difference I can think of.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those are my thoughts on Stoicism. I think it's helpful. I think you're right that there's some balance required.
As a review, what are the so memento mori?
Yep.
So
the last time thought experiment.
The last time.
Negative visualization. When something is going wrong, imagine how it could be worse and see if that doesn't tilt things in the direction of gratitude for you. Think about how great of a story it might make someday.
You can tell it on a podcast.
That's right.
Eventually.
That's right. Those are some of the Stoic exercises. There's more. You can Google them and find a bunch. I'd also recommend the Stoicism subreddit /r/Stoicism.
Probably a lot of good conversation going on there.
Yeah, great stuff.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of Open to Truth. As we mentioned at the outset, we have the blog that's every week. We'd love for you to subscribe to that. Great way to support us. And actually, commenting on whatever is like the new algorithmic best practice.
Yeah.
So, and I respond to every comment.
So join the conversation.
Yep.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. If we missed something, if you've got another perspective to offer, we always want to hear it.
Write into mailbag@opentotruth.com.
Cool.
And we'd love to answer your questions and talk about it here.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Stay curious.
See ya.